On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
This show is a Hopful Media podcast production. Hello, everybody. Welcome to America's Secret Wars, the podcast about forgotten and overlooked conflicts in American history. Today, I am joined once again by Roberto Toro of the History of Saqartvelo, Georgia, Czar Power, the Quest for Power, and the Organizing Committee for the Intelligence Beach Podcast Conference. Roberto, how are you doing, and should I start organizing an intervention?
I'm doing great. Actually, I moved recently and I'm in a much happier position. And I will say, I'm helping organize, but I'm not doing much with it. I'm just assisting here and there.
Uh-huh. And that's why you were recruiting us to 12 panels last time I was on a call with you.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we were playing D&D. It worked out perfectly.
Yes, that is how our D&D games work. There's between the Discord server where I met Roberto, there's like 4 D&D groups and it's all podcasters.
Yes, it really is. So I actually have a question for you.
All right.
Which fascist history group are we learning about today?
Because
that seems to be the theme for you when you invite me on.
See, for about 12 seconds, I debated whether or not I should have you as the guest on this episode. Because on one hand, you're the perfect guest for this episode. And on the other, having you in the description is kind of a spoiler for the double entendre in the title of this episode. When Al-Qaeda invaded Georgia.
Oh, wait, what? Wait, what?
Yes.
You found something.
I did. I found this right away and have been trying to figure out how to do it for a while. But apologies to anybody who read the title and was hoping we'd get the story of Al-Qaeda versus Al-Qaeda. Instead, we are going to be talking about the time that the U.S. helped fight with Al-Qaeda militants in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, a.k.a. Saqartvelo, a.k.a. Saqartvelo.
Amazing. Wow. See, I'm not that far yet. I'm in the 500s. So this is what? I'll figure out what time it is, but 1900s?
We're fast forwarding about 1,500 years.
Yeah, perfect. See, I wouldn't even know this. So
it's so modern that it almost wraps back around to something you might know from having been there.
Oh, possibly.
Just through the cultural osmosis of having been aware of modern Georgia.
Okay.
Technically, I could have had anybody on for this episode. I thought about making Bree my go-to for modern terrorism episodes, which would be funny.
You see someone bin Laden in podcasting.
Yes, she is. But if I picked anybody else, then nobody on the pod would be able to pronounce the names.
I mean, also very true.
So I am relying on you to correct me here.
Alrighty, I'm just going to need it written because Georgian is a fun language.
The Caucasian languages are a linguistic, I think the polite term is clusterfuck.
Yes.
So, as usual, when I was looking for topics, I started with the 2004 congressional report on the historical use of force overseas and the Wikipedia page Timeline of United States Military Operations, which is basically that congressional report, and then every time something new happens, they tack that on. I went down a rabbit hole after noticing references in two separate presidential letters from George W. Bush to Congress from 2004 that both mention an increase in troops deployed to Georgia and Djibouti.
Yeah, he said Georgia.
uh, these were just referenced in those letters with absolutely no context. And naturally, I was trying to figure out why a country in the Caucasus was being lumped together with the Horn of Africa. It turns out that both countries were used as vital staging grounds for the escalation of the global war on terror that happened in 2004 after the fall of Saddam Hussein. So nothing was really happening in Djibouti for a variety of reasons, including both colonial history and all of their neighbors constantly fighting.
Yeah.
That country has just maintained close relations with France and the US since gaining its independence. And since they control one side of the entrance to the Red Sea, and they like other countries paying them rent, Djibouti is just crawling with foreign military bases. So it was used as a staging ground for Operation Enduring Freedom, Horn of Africa, which was more focused on Somalia and Sudan in ways that I'll address some other time. 2004 was also the birth of the multinational force Iraq, better known as the Coalition Forces, after the fall of Saddam Hussein's government and the beginning of America's botched attempt at setting up a new Iraqi state.
Okay, you said that, and my mind just immediately went, America, fuck yeah. Literally, Team America is just playing in my head now.
This is what that movie is about, right? Like,
okay.
So this is the context for why I even found these events that we're going to talk about today. So George W. Bush approved additional Georgian training programs with American advisors as part of the coalition building. And one of the reasons that Georgia was so on board with helping the U.S. fight Islamic extremists is because the U.S. was already in country and actively helping to fight Al-Qaeda within Georgia's borders.
Oh, did not know this. Is this why we have a George Bush highway in Tbilisi?
Yeah, almost certainly.
Okay. By the way, there's a George Bush highway in Tbilisi.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. It takes you to the airport.
That's absurd, but having done the research for this episode makes a lot of sense. Especially because of some of the political changes we'll get to right at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Three main questions for the day, Roberto. What do you know about the Penkisi Gorge, the Second Chechen War, and have you heard of this whole 9/11 thing?
So the first thing was the Senkishi Gorge?
Penkisi, Pankisi.
Oh, Pankisi. Okay. Pankisi Gorge, I know nothing. That's other than like, I know there's an ensemble called Pankisi, but that's about it.
That made Googling really hard.
Yeah.
I kept finding music.
I know a lot about the Second Chechen War, just because, that's part of my degree is Russian history. And then 9/11, I remember seeing planes hitting the Twin Towers when I was at home.
Yeah, that I think is a good baseline. The story today could really start from basically any time after about 1600 and the charter of the English East India Company, but that's probably a little extreme for our purposes. You could make a case for the Russo-Persian War of 1722, the Darcy oil concession in Iran, or really any major political turning point in the region between the beginning of the 20th century and 1979. Really, though, we just need to speed run through history to reach August of 1999 and the Second Chechen War.
It does feel like things always happen in Georgia in August.
Yeah, well, this is going to happen across the border in August, but yes.
But like, I would say this, Russia invades Georgia in 2008 in August as well. So I'm like, come on, fucking Russia.
Don't know if I included the date, but I'm reasonably sure one of the protest revolutions at the end of this is also an August event.
So, yeah, yep, exactly. It's the fall madness.
So basically, the whole stretch from Iraq to Pakistan became a proxy theater of the Cold War for a few decades. This was an extension, really, of the British and Russian conflict over the region called the Great Game in the century before the Cold War, which they say ended in like 1907, but for some reason it just kept happening after that.
Mm-hmm.
This regional conflict between gradually dying global superpowers, let's say, eventually led to lots of Western interference and communist interference in Afghanistan, which eventually went through a communist takeover in 1973. And then, following the Iranian Revolution 6 years later, the resulting instability sparked a Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
Yep, I know this.
Famously, as depicted in the documentary Rambo 3, this went very poorly for the Soviets.
I've never seen a Rambo film.
Really?
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone classics.
I don't like Sylvester Stallone.
But that's reasonable. But you got to see Rambo 3. It's dedicated to the brave fighters of the Mujahideen.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Especially what happens later in history.
Well, it went poorly for the Soviets and turned out to be such a drain on their economy and resources that the Afghan War became one of the major contributors to the outright collapse of the USSR.
I mean, the soldiers were literally drinking alcohol made out of gasoline during it.
Yeah, they were literally drinking jet fuel. People, the Lions Led by Donkeys podcast has a great series on the Soviet-Afghan War. Speaking of the collapse of the USSR, when it crumbled, a bunch of the constituent Soviet republics declared independence. Georgia was actually one of the very first to do so, basically as soon as they could have an election in 1990.
Yeah, they want to get the fuck out.
Which was the smart play. It was a very messy process that involved a failed communist coup, the resignation of famous Pepsi spokesman Mikhail Gorbachev as Soviet premier, and that's a real thing, go look it up, and a bizarre situation where Kazakhstan was technically the only part of the USSR that still existed after everyone, including Russia, had left.
Kazakhstan, greatest country in the world.
In many ways, the fallout of the Soviet collapse is still today in 2024 an ongoing process.
We're still feeling the after effects in current day Georgia.
Georgia, Ukraine,
oh yeah,
Azerbaijan, Armenia. It is an ongoing affair. Many of the autonomous regions and smaller republics, especially at the borders of the USSR, declared independence, but could neither get recognition nor successfully fight off their stronger neighbors. And if Russia said they wanted to keep you at the time, you basically didn't have a choice. Today, there's just an issue that some people in Russia wish they had said they wanted to keep more. Basically, all of the recognized countries to come out of this have some sort of border dispute with one another or within their own territory.
Or in Georgia's case, with Russia and within its own territory.
Yeah, which is now sort of just Russia these days.
Now it's just both Russia, but yeah.
We will be seeing quite a lot, like the very next paragraph where I say, there were several of these within or bordering Georgia, namely South Ossetia and Chechnya, both of which saw war break out almost immediately.
Or the Saqartvelo region, as the Georgians would prefer you to say it. Because South Ossetia is giving a case to the Russians who have North Ossetia. So it's just a hard thing to pronounce, but so it's the Saqartvelo region, yeah.
I feel like that's just a confusing inverse of the whole Greek Macedonia versus North Macedonia bullshit on the other side of Russia.
Yes, yes.
Putting directions doesn't make them different or similar places.
Yeah, but it's giving credence to the South Ossetian government in their
Well,
eyes.
they're like I said, now they're basically all Russia.
I mean, I have opinions on this, but yeah, I have opinions on this, and I'm very much of the case that Russia is occupying, and 80% of 20% of Georgia is occupied by Russia. So
Yeah,
I will come out with that on your show, but not my show.
a whole lot to get into with any if you pick like I don't know 50 square miles of anywhere in the old USSR, you can find a civil war if you really want to. So Georgia reclaimed their territory in 1991 or settled the dispute, however you want to put that. And then the first Chechen war broke out with Russia beginning in 1994.
Yep.
Georgia was not directly involved in this any more than just being a country on the border of a conflict, as the at the time Chechen Ingush Republic tried to secede from Russia.
Hmm.
Among many other factors, including a history of ethnic cleansing and religious oppression under the Tsars and Soviets alike, the republics of Chechnya, Ingushetia, and Dagestan are all in the northern Caucasus and nominally within the borders of the Russian Federation. Chechnya, in particular, fought very hard to win its independence and failed in 1996. This was increasingly framed as a religious conflict for the Chechens during the mid 90s, where the majority of people are Sunni Muslims.
Yeah, the that southern part is very highly, at least in Dagestan and Chechnya, very highly Muslim. Then you have like the Crimean Tartars and everything too. So essentially, historically, that was Ottoman controlled until Russia took, and like Golden Horde controlled until Russia took it over.
Like I said, one of the valid starting points for this episode would have been the Russo-Persian War, where Russia took Georgia from the Safavid Persian Empire. Fun additional crossover for me.
Well, not took, but more so said you're part of us now when the Georgians really asked for help.
More so walked in.
Yeah, they walked in and took over. The Georgians were like, "Hey, please help us. You're an Orthodox country." And they're like, "Yes, we'll take you over." And the Georgians were like, "We didn't ask for this."
The story of the Russian Empire is a lot of, could you help us defend us from the Turks? And Russia saying, yes, you can be part of Russia.
Yep, we will get to that once we hit the Russian Empire. Listen to Tsar power.
This situation in Chechnya was fertile ground for the rapid growth of Islamic fundamentalist terrorism, mostly rooted in the Wahhabist school of Islamic thought, which is the same root ideology as Al-Qaeda. And if you go a little bit further back in their history, it's also the root ideology of ISIS.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, they big deal. Somewhat recently, and probably again in the future if Syria keeps going the way it is. So, young extremists from across the Muslim world had flocked to Afghanistan during the Soviet-Afghan War to learn and help the Mujahideen and receive arms and training from the American and Pakistani special forces. Within Afghanistan, this eventually led to the formation of the Taliban. More broadly, it created a bunch of connections and networks for Sunni extremists. None more famous than Osama bin Laden and his organization, Al-Qaeda, which wasn't so much the terrorist army that it was framed as 20 years ago, but like a networking opportunity and grant funder for terrorism.
Yeah, wasn't he like a Saudi prince or something, or like a Saudi noble?
Uh, like vaguely aristocratic, but functionally like oil barons.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, ludicrously wealthy. And his one of his brothers is actually like good friends with some U.S. politicians in a way that like is kind of awkward, but everyone it just rolls with because it's not his fault he's related to Osama.
Oh yeah, we just cheered when you killed your brother on my birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was the news when Osama bin Laden was killed. I come home from like birthday dinner and I'm like, Osama bin Laden said, I'm like, thanks for the birthday present, Obama.
uh, Yeah, where were you when Osama bin Laden died?
Eating Chinese food. Oh no, Japanese. I wanted sushi that day.
So even as Al-Qaeda cells with very direct connections to bin Laden were blowing up the World Trade Center and several US embassies in the 1990s,
Mm-hmm.
other Al-Qaeda affiliates were training and funding the insurgents that would eventually kick off the Second Chechen War in 1999. Various insurgent groups based in the North Caucasus carried out terror attacks and kidnappings all over Russia in the years between the two Chechen wars. But it was ultimately the bombing of an apartment building in Moscow that got it started.
Yeah, Russia doesn't care about stuff until it hits Moscow or St. Petersburg.
But they kidnapped a fucking general before this.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter until they hit Moscow or St. Petersburg.
And the thing is, they knew the Chechens kidnapped that general. There wasn't, and still to this day isn't, any real evidence tying this apartment bombing to the Chechens. But tensions had been running high for almost 3 years. Russia had been preparing for the inevitable reinvasion of Chechnya. And the head of the FSB, Russia's main intelligence agency and successor to the more famous KGB, or blamed the bombing on Chechnya anyway. Roberto, I am guessing you know who the head of the FSB was in early 1999.
Is it Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin?
It is, in fact, Vlad Putin, aka my dad's Russian lookalike. I will have to find a sufficiently blurry picture to post to social media and prove that, but it is weirdly true.
And my last episode. As of right now. Oh, I hate him so much.
So, yeah, the Second Chechen War was actually quite instrumental to Putin's rise to power.
Mm-hmm.
After years of tensions, he became the spearhead of Russia's pro-war politics, and within the span of a few months, he went from the head of the FSB to prime minister to president for the first time.
See, I see how this will have no repercussions in the future.
Oh, this, from the standpoint of 2024, this episode is so fucking weird in relation to Putin. So, there's dictators and shit. Everybody gets that. It is the relationship he will have to the United States throughout the entirety of this episode that is so strange.
Yeah.
Under Putin's leadership, Russia carried out a brutal and indiscriminate bombing campaign to basically just blast their way into the Chechen capital at Grozny and forcibly occupy the region.
So nothing's really changed with his tactics.
No, nothing at all, because it keeps working.
Yeah.
It really came quite close to working in Ukraine and might have if there was less mud.
True.
Of course, just because they had territorial victory did not mean fighting was actually over. Just that Chechens and like-minded militants from the surrounding republics melted into the mountains and began a decades-long insurgent campaign against the Russian government. There are hypothetically a few of these cells still around, but the last major attack for many of them was in 2017, and the last specifically Chechen one was in 2009.
Mm-hmm. So it's pretty much calmed down by now.
Yeah, significantly so.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, he's sending all the Chechens to Ukraine.
Well, yeah, fun aside, one of the keys to ending the Second Chechen War quickly was when Imam Ahmed Kadyrov switched sides, allied with Putin, and became president of Chechnya. As soon as he was old enough, Ahmed's son, Ramzan Kadyrov, took the same office, which he still holds, in addition to being a colonel general in the Russian army, because Russian military ranks are very silly.
Okay, I'm gonna be that guy. It's Kadyrov.
Is it Kadyrov?
Kadyrov, yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing. I can get a grasp of Cyrillic, but it's based on Greek. So yeah, I go with what I have.
No worries. This is why you have me here.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's Kadyrov. It's the sound in Russian.
So Kadyrov has actually been in the news quite a lot recently as one of the main faces of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
He's a maniac.
Using his experience in committing crimes against humanity in his own country on the front lines. So that's fun.
Yeah, I'm more scared of Kadyrov because if he gets in any sense of like more power, because he's basically a dictator in his own right in Chechnya. He just does whatever the fuck he wants. And
yeah, he's a warlord.
He's literally a warlord, and it is terrifying because he's like even like made videos of like, oh yeah, this is what I'm gonna do if I capture, Vysotsky or no, what's his name?
Zelensky.
Vysotsky's a Russian musician. Oops. Yeah, if he like, oh, I want to make this picture of me torturing Zelensky, and it's just like has an actor who kind of looks like Zelensky, and just kind of like has a video of him like play torturing him. I'm like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the guy that Putin wants to be in charge of Chechnya because he has no qualms about using these brutal tactics against his own people to prevent another Chechen rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
You know what else is fun, Roberto?
Coke?
The glorious victory of capitalism over the USSR, which is why we, like Mikhail Gorbachev, can have advertisements. We are back, and now that we have laid some of the groundwork, the Second Chechen War ended officially on April 30th in the year 2000.
And do you know how that ended?
In which way are you asking? Like
with the school?
April 30th is when they signed the it starts with a B. The siege of that school in Grozny. Yeah.
Yep.
Chet, the brief summary for listeners is Chechen militants occupied a school and the FSB Waco'd them.
Yeah. Yeah, not great.
Yeah. Kids and families inside, big first day of school event, like dozens of civilians inside as the FSB just torched the motherfucker.
Yeah. They're not great people.
Remember, Putin was in charge.
Yep. And he says he wants to defend the kids of his country.
Yeah, his country being the Principality of Moscow.
Yeah. These Chechens, they don't count.
Grand Prince Vladimir.
Okay, another digression. I remember being in Moscow. I was in a gift store or souvenir shop, and I saw this portrait of Vladimir Putin dressed up as a czar. And I read it in there. I said to myself, I want this in my room. I did not buy it because it didn't fit in my bag.
I really thought you were about to like just reach off out of frame like an inch and like pull in this big portrait of Tsar Putin. He has a Matryoshka doll instead.
Yes, because that was a lot cheaper because they wanted me to pay like $500 for the Putin portrait.
Hang it over the door like the king in a Thai restaurant.
Exactly.
Oh boy. We are off track.
You're in my territory now. This happens. I'm sorry.
The Belsen School, that's what it's fucking called.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after the signing of the treaty and the Belsen School siege, a lot of the Chechen resistance just went to ground and switched over to an insurgency. But some of them needed to just get the hell out of Russia. So they bounced over the nearest border into Georgia. Now, if you're going to run a successful Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist resistance movement, it helps to be in an isolated bit of country with little to no actual state oversight, especially if you have co-religionists or even better, ethnic relatives in the area. Fortunately for the Chechen resistance, Georgia had just that in the Pankisi Gorge, a valley on the southern side of the Northern Caucasus in eastern Georgia, generally considered the nearest inhabitable area in the mountains to the Russian border.
Yeah, those mountains are fucking high. Like, I climbed one. I climbed them. They're not fun to climb.
Especially the northern Caucasus are borderline impassable.
Oh my God. Yeah, like you need to go through the Daryali Gorge typically.
Like, for all of the Afghan fighters in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, which are even fucking taller, uh, like they are still more
Hmm.
traversable than a lot of the Caucasus.
Yeah, I got altitude sickness from being up there.
Yeah, the this was a very isolated and very insulated community of Kists, a Chechen descended ethnic group native to Georgia. Um,
Hmm. Haven't heard of these.
People in the community will identify themselves as Kists. There's kind of some debate among Chechens of whether or not to actually view them as separate. They are Chechen speaking and everything. It's just a kind of a geographical difference.
Hmm.
And this was a very culturally and religious conservative community. Villages and neighborhoods are still frequently structured around extended family clans. Offenses are even today still sometimes resolved with blood feuds. And that's not limited to the Kists or the emigrant Chechens. For being such a small area, northern Georgia is wildly diverse, and many groups maintain these practices in the mountains.
Oh my God, it's near impossible to root anything out from the Caucasus Mountains. Like they were still struggling to root out some like pagan practices, even during the Soviet era.
Yeah, at a certain point, that just loops back around to just being folk religion.
No, they're it's like Christians doing like folk practices which weren't in accordance with everything, and it's just like, yeah, it's still difficult because folk religion still you can still see it there, but mostly in the mountains. It's just small communities. They're fun though.
This is an area that is in the mountains. We're talking a couple thousand people in the entire valley. Uh,
Yeah.
Initially, it just looked like this would be a safe haven for Chechens fleeing the ongoing war in their homeland and a place where insurgents could blend in and operate without direct interference from the FSB. Then a second plane hit the towers and America was under attack. America doesn't like being under attack.
Just remember, jet fuel can't melt steel beams.
This is correct. It can just weaken them until they snap and collapse in a resulting fiery explosion because there's gas pipelines running all through the fucking building.
Don't bring my conspiracy theories like that.
uh, well, after steel beams may or may not have melted, the Taliban did offer to hand over Osama bin Laden gift wrapped, but we decided we'd rather invade Afghanistan.
Wait. Seriously?
Oh, yeah, the Taliban offered on September 13th or something. They were like, yeah, you can have them, just please don't invade our country and topple our government. Uh, but that didn't make people feel like they were accomplishing anything.
What the fuck, America?
Yeah, uh-huh. And there was some internal logic to Afghanistan at the time, like, okay, you're gonna give us the guy, but you still are happy to host his training camps, and you're kind of shitty dictators. Except we were really bad at toppling the Afghan regime, and even worse at installing a new one, and it's like nothing changed.
I mean, it's literally just America. We just go in and kind of try to, and then it just makes things worse because we're our own worst
Yeah,
enemy.
you just wait.
Oh no.
There were a few big time Chechen leaders moving in and out of Pankisi at the
Hmm.
time, and the Bush White House actually alleged that some of them were using it as a corridor to funnel Chechen fighters out of Russia, through Azerbaijan, and then across Central Asia to fight alongside Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. Strictly speaking, this hasn't been proven, but there is a lot of anecdotal evidence from both Afghans and US soldiers to support the claim that Chechens were somehow getting to Afghanistan. So that seems likely.
I mean, you cross the Caspian Sea and Iran.
If you go across the Caspian, you just bypass Iran and go through like Turkmenistan, and they didn't give a shit at the time.
Yeah, of course they don't.
We hadn't turned them into an air base yet. Several of these Chechen leaders were even like Mujahideen veterans of the Soviet-Afghan War. So like there were genuinely connections to be made.
Mm-hmm.
But the main guy in Pankisi was Ruslan Gelayev. Ironically, he was a Soviet veteran of the Afghan War before switching to Chechen nationalism and fighting under the leadership of Shamil Basayev, at this point, the biggest name in Chechen terror attacks inside of Russia.
Okay.
Ironically, when 9/11 happened, the world hadn't quite finished drawing the battle lines for the war on terror yet. And Georgia actually hired Ruslan to lead a raid against Russian-backed separatists in Abkhazia a few weeks later. As in, like, 9/11 happens, and in the first week of October, this guy is working for the Georgian government.
What the? Oh my gosh.
Because, like, he had vague Al-Qaeda ties, but mostly he was an anti-Russian guy.
Well, up until the last, like, 2 years, that's what they liked.
Right.
At least the government.
And this started to deteriorate pretty quickly once Ruslan took the money and weapons from that raid, and his Mujahideen outfit splintered into several separate groups that all attacked over the Russian border.
Mm-hmm.
Vladimir Putin recognized this as an opportunity to collaborate with the United States and became a vocal supporter of the war on terror, directing the FSB to share intelligence about his own Islamic terrorists and their ties to Al-Qaeda. It was also an opportunity to put pressure on Georgia to stop fighting pro-Russian separatists and help put down the Chechens instead, basically putting Georgia in between a terrorist threat and a Russian threat to make them do Russia's job for them.
Yeah.
The Georgian president, you might have to help me with this one. Eduard
Shevardnadze.
Shevardnadze.
Yeah.
Eduard Shevardnadze was really hesitant to this at first. Russia kept meddling in Georgian politics, and allowing Chechen rebels to operate in Pankisi had been a way to stick it to the Russians without actually sparking a conflict.
And they haven't stopped meddling.
No, they have not. In fact, Shevardnadze actually denied that there were Chechens in his country at all, which is kind of hilarious in retrospect.
No. There are no Chechens in Georgia.
There were hundreds of refugees pouring into the country after the Battle of Grozny. It got to the point where Putin threatened to invade and have Russian troops do it if Georgia continued to refuse.
Well, they made it anyways, a few years later.
I know, but right now it's 2002.
Yeah. Oh, just 6 more years.
Once the US started calling for intervention in the area, it was over. It's really hard to resist the demands of what most people still saw as the world's twin superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of that dynamic hadn't quite settled in yet. To do that effectively, Georgia still needed more money and training for its army because, like most of the post-Soviet states, they basically took the local police force, and that was now the army because most of the army had been Russian.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the United States came in. On February 27th, 2002, it was announced that 200 U.S. Army Special Forces, aka Green Berets, were headed to Georgia as part of the Georgia Train and Equip Program, or GTEP.
I think they walked into the wrong Georgia.
Yeah, it feels a bit like that. Ironically, there's a good chance that a lot of them like flew out of
to go there, landed in Georgia. Yeah, it's like you never really left.
Yeah, Atlanta, Tbilisi, what's the difference?
I mean, peaches and wine.
So GTEP was meant to provide equipment and training for several 600-man battalions that would help root out the Chechen resistance in Penkisi, then join the coalition forces in Afghanistan and also Iraq, but they didn't say that publicly yet.
Iraq, where?
The Russian public staged protests against US intervention in their backyard, but Putin himself pledged open support for the project. So Putin was actively supporting US intervention directly on the Russian border, like on the border.
Huh.
Because, it meant the Americans were going to pay to deal with his own rebel problem.
You know what?
He had just conned the United States into fighting the Chechen War for him. It was great.
I mean, he's about to do the same thing with the Ukrainian invasion.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's really fucked up. Something about Hannibal Lecter.
Oh my gosh.
Fuck everything. So yeah, of course, Russia also played this up. Their foreign ministers suggested that Osama bin Laden was hiding in Georgia rather than Afghanistan.
Lol.
They were really trying to play the ties between the Chechens and Al-Qaeda to make sure the US would do this for them.
Oh yes. Osama bin Laden. He is in Georgia. You should find him over there. He's in this region over here. Oh yes, they're speaking Arabic. That's not Chechen.
Well, there was a lot of Arabic speaking going on in Penkisi at this point too, because once the war really got going in Afghanistan and like Al-Qaeda moved to actual like we are going to fight the United States footing, they started sending guys everywhere they could.
Oh.
Yes, there were several dozen organized, prominent, directly Al-Qaeda affiliate guys in Penkisi at this point. That's part of why the U.S. felt the need to get involved. In reality, while the Chechens and Al-Qaeda had previously shared some networking and supply chains, they were focused on very different issues until the U.S. and Russia started getting more directly involved here. For its part, the United States saw intervention in Georgia as a potential pathway to bring the republic into NATO and set up in Russia's backyard.
Hey!
Somehow, Georgia ended up being a proxy for both sides of the Cold War, which everyone was still pretending was over at this point.
Hint, it's not.
This was also a great opportunity for the US and British financial interests to get involved in Georgian oil pipelines out of Azerbaijan. Because if there's anything the War on Terror was actually about, it was getting oil out of countries that used to border Russia.
Oh yeah, don't we love some nice oil out there? Get us some oil so we don't have to make it from our own country.
This is what happens when you put an oil cowboy in charge of the country.
He's from Connecticut.
Yeah, but his like character was oil cowboy.
Yeah, and he wasn't even that great of like an oil baron. He just managed to sell his company, and like
the Bush oil interest is actually kind of pathetic. It's
his dad who was a successful one.
A lot of it's Dick Cheney's fault, if we're being honest.
Fucking Dick Cheney. Is he dead yet?
No. He was campaigning with Biden.
Oh. I mean, they're the same age.
Yeah. It's just that, maybe campaigning with the guy who had a 2% approval rating is maybe not a great idea. But speaking of Dick Cheney and all of the problems of the Bush administration, I spent way too long this afternoon trying to find a quote to pull from a May 2002 article in Counterpunch by Gary Loop. I couldn't really find a quote that represented the whole article, but it's a fascinating time capsule of a read.
Mm-hmm.
Loop correctly identifies that the GTEP would help the US prop up a corrupt president in Georgia and fight against national liberation struggles, but also it frames Putin as an utterly benevolent actor in the whole thing and outright questions whether or not there was a terrorist presence in Pankisi to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Putin is still relatively new on the scene at this point. It's a time when the US was ramping up to the invasion of Iraq, and it was about to see the largest anti war protests in our history. There were legitimate concerns about like whether or not intervening in Georgia was a legitimate thing to do. And in hindsight, the US government probably regrets not letting Ruslan Galiyev continue attacking the Russians.
Well, I think to lighten the mood here a bit, we need a Bushism, and I have one.
You're the Texan.
Okay, our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
uh, that is second in my heart only to the speech he gave a couple years ago.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly justified and brutal invasion of Iraq. I mean, of Ukraine, Iraq too. Anyway, I'm 75.
He's only 75. Maybe he should be president.
They misunderestimated me.
God.
Okay, I think we can agree the past is over.
Yeah.
That's another Bushism.
And that's why history doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In the short term, the GTEP did everything that Loop was concerned about. But also, there really were Chechen insurgents in those hills. The initial train and equip program did exactly what it was meant to. And within a couple of months, 1,000 Georgian police and border enforcement troops were dispatched to the Pankisi Gorge as a sort of test run for the American training and equipment. By October of 2002, they had their first clash with rebels in Pankisi. American aerial surveillance identified and tracked a group of Arabs living in Pankisi with suspected ties to Al-Qaeda, and Georgian security forces ambushed their car, shooting the driver and arresting the passengers. They really were insurgent terrorists, and the sudden arrival of an actual military presence set most of the Chechen rebels scrambling. Within weeks, over a dozen militants. Within a year, that count was up to 30, mostly from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Yemen, or the Central Asian republics. That said, at least one guy was Japanese, and God, I wish we knew more about him.
Do we even have his name?
No, just the fact that one of the Al-Qaeda affiliate terrorists in Pankisi was a Japanese man.
I love this.
Also, Roberto just sent me that picture of Putin as a czar, and it's an angle and period in Putin's hairline that really makes him look like my father, and that makes me uncomfortable.
I love this even more.
So yes, I really wish we knew more about that Japanese guy. But like most of the other non-Chechen Al-Qaeda affiliates captured in Pankisi, they were immediately turned over to the United States and sent to what the Bush administration termed at the time intensive interrogation in Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, so they're just asking them really hard questions.
Yeah. So to be clear, that's fucking torture. It's torture. That's what it was. That's what waterboarding is, and electrocuting testicles.
Enhanced interrogation techniques. Come on. Enhanced interrogation techniques.
Yeah, war crimes. Yeah, there we go. That's what they were. Led to a lot of false confessions, including one that claimed a Chechen leader was killed in combat by U.S. trained troops. Turns out he was alive and died in Russia several years later.
By falling out of a window.
He was poisoned, actually. Yeah.
With what's Putin's favorite poison? Is it ricin?
No, that was a KGB favorite. No, it's whatever they used to kill those guys in England. I think it starts with a P.
Uh, Novichok.
Yes, that's the one. Um, so yeah, one of the people detained was a guy in Al Qaeda's Majlis al Shura, which is kind of the governing body of the organization. So far as I can tell, this dude is either dead or still in classified holding in Guantanamo. It is not clear if the US government even knows his real name. At the time he was captured in late 2002, he was going by Saif al Islam al Masri, which means the Sword of Islam of Egypt, which could be a name, but probably not.
I mean, it's a badass name.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, it's literally Saladin's name,
Oh, that's why it's badass. Saladin's.
down to the of Egypt bit, even though Saladin was Kurdish.
Oh, tell that to Erdogan.
Erdogan could never. On one hand, all of this was a major win for the Bush administration because it pretty easily justified getting involved, at least for the politics of the time. You couldn't really argue that there weren't Al Qaeda affiliates in Georgia anymore. On the other hand, it just kind of made the Bush administration look like the fucking liars they were and are, since all of their press briefings up to that point had denied there was any concern of Al Qaeda affiliates operating in Georgia. I don't know why they would lie, but they did.
I mean, I have one easy answer.
Yeah, because they're fundamentally incapable of telling the truth.
Yes, they're politicians and also Republicans. Um, yeah, I have very liberal views, and I come from a communist country.
It's 2003, and you're like, oh no, we don't think there's actually terrorists there. We're just helping the Georgians get ready to do things. Like, but there's terrorists. Like, why would you? It's 2003. That's the goal. Like,
Yeah.
you're invading Iraq and discovering there's not any terrorists there. Like, take the win, guys.
We just rooted them out. You know that we came in and they left. Perfect.
Well, that kind of. Um, the whole situation is baffling to me, looking at it as history. Soon after the GTEP was announced, the Washington Post sent journalists to interview people in Penkisi. The head administrator of Duisi, which is the pseudo capital, largest town in the valley, said that, quote, Arabs had financed a new brick mosque, set up a health clinic, and taught children to read and write in Arabic. They were peaceful people not connected with any terrorism. The regional police chief in the town of Akhmeta told The Guardian, we haven't seen a single international terrorist here, but only some Wahhabites who had come to build mosques. Wahhabites being the Al-Qaeda ideology.
Okay.
But, like, doesn't have to be militants. But a year later, after the raids had begun, a New York Times interview with a Duisi school headmaster revealed that 30 or so Chechen fighters had arrived in late 2001 and taken over the school as a base of operations because that went so well last time they tried it.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't openly hostile to the locals, but these Chechen militants had guns and wouldn't accept any arguments. The school headmaster described them as, quote, an odd mix, doctors, lawyers, criminals, and drug addicts. Indeed, the detritus left behind filled out the details of the headmaster's story. A makeshift exercise bar was still suspended between two trees, and used hypodermic needles and empty vials lay scattered around the schoolyard.
Oh gosh.
Which is pretty run of the mill for these sorts of terrorist groups. You get the ideologues, the lawyers, and the doctors who really believe in the cause, and you get the more mercenary drug addict guys who are there to get a paycheck and easy access to heroin.
I mean, and Al-Qaeda has lots of that, or at least opium.
Yeah, and at this point, they've still got a direct line to Afghan opium fields.
Yeah. Was opium and heroin the same thing?
Heroin is an opiate, so yeah,
Okay, okay, okay.
it's more refined, but basically, this particular group of Chechens who occupied the school fled as soon as the U.S. backed crackdown started. They crossed the Russian border and basically immediately ran into a Russian army detachment and were gunned down in a brief battle as soon as they entered the country.
Oh, back when they were actually decent.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got mortars and the other guys have half an AK-47, like you're probably going to do all right no matter what the situation is.
Pshoo, pshoo, pshoo. Yeah, true. Mortar wins.
At this time in late 2003, there were still around 50 Chechen fighters known to be in Penkisi, uh, but that was down from several hundred at the initial push for US and Russian cooperation in 2001. It's not even clear where all of these
Hmm.
guys went. Presumably, most of them went back to Russia and the ongoing Chechen guerrilla war, while others fled through Azerbaijan or went home. But to be honest, we don't know for most of them. What we do know is that it is time for an ad break. We are back, and we have just covered the kind of the peak of the fighting and the raiding in the U.S. backed crackdown on Georgia's Pankisi Gorge. A partial consequence of the U.S. intervention in Georgia was, ironically, the so called Rose Revolution against President Eduard Shevardnadze. By the time the GTEP arrived, Shevardnadze was already seen as a corrupt wannabe dictator by many of his own people and most of the international community. That is one of the reasons that there were many concerns on the left about sending him military aid in the first place. Shevardnadze had kind of hoped that letting the US in would lead the Bush administration to endorse him. They did not. So long as a more democratic alternative government was still cooperative, the Bush administration didn't really care. Uh, we don't have time to deal with all of early 2000s Georgian politics. You can listen to Roberto in 10 to 20 years for that.
Hell yeah.
Basically, the Georgian economy was in free fall. There was a contested parliamentary election, and Shevardnadze resigned in order to be replaced by Mikhail Saakashvili.
Hey, you pronounced that correctly.
It's like the only Georgian name I know. This was the Rose Revolution, which was seen at the time as Georgia's transition to democracy.
Eh.
The thing is that didn't end well either.
So, what, 2012, Saakashvili's kicked out, and then like 2024, the Russians are basically in control of the
Yeah,
government. So,
that and the
yeah.
intermediary period isn't particularly great. Uh
No. But they did elect their first female president in
ah
2018. So,
yeah, why
who follows my podcast?
that's confusing. Uh Look, there seems to be an unwritten rule in history that you can't have your first female elected leader unless it comes from terrible circumstances.
Yep.
So Saakashvili did make and support a ton of reforms, mostly for the better. But he also pretty blatantly used all of those newly US trained security personnel to violently crack down on protesters and an attempted secession movement in the autonomous region of Adjara.
Oh, that's where you get the cheese boats from.
The what?
The Ajara, that's where you get the Hachapuri
Oh,
from.
really?
The cheese boat. Yeah, because it's Hachapuri
Ah.
Ajaruli.
They tried to secede in, I think, 2006 or 7. And the crackdown
Yep.
was extremely brutal using the newly provided US equipment. In 2004, the GTEP was reorganized as the Georgia Sustainment and Stability Operations Program, or GSSOP. This was a reflection that both the training and equipment had already been provided, and that Georgia was now being folded into the coalition forces occupying Iraq. This is what George Bush referred to in his congressional memos that got me started on my research for this, when 7 battalions of Green Berets and US Marines split custody of the new Georgian program. The
Hmm.
discovery of several Al-Qaeda affiliate groups in Europe in 2005 attempting to produce ricin poison led the Russian government to claim that this was tied to more Al-Qaeda affiliated Chechens operating in Georgia. Um, these claims were a bit disjointed, starting with the fact that the plant you need to produce ricin doesn't grow in the Northern Caucasus, and that the Chechen leader accused of coordinating with Al Qaeda had been in jail for 2 years. So
Hmm.
probably not orchestrating militants in Georgia unless there's something the Russian government would like to share with the class. Beginning in January of 2005, most of the Georgian internal troops were pulled out of the Penkisi Gorge and checkpoints were disassembled on the grounds that the threat had passed and been dealt with. 5 months later, the first official Chechen refugees returned across the Russian border from Penkisi by official means, as the Chechen insurgency had greatly diminished on both sides. However, between those two events, the new government carried out a violent crackdown bordering on a pogrom against the Christs in Penkisi, all on the grounds that their community had become a center of Wahhabi Islamic fundamentalism. Essentially, Saakashvili picked a minority group and said, well, they're all just like Al Qaeda.
Oh no.
Fortunately, nobody has ever designated an entire Muslim civilian population as affiliated with a terrorist group uh, ever again. That's never happened. Only this one time.
Hmm.
That is a 5 for 5 of the last few episodes, seeing an unfortunate parallel to the genocide going on in Israel. Somebody can put that on their bingo card.
More genocide in Israel? When does it ever stop?
It doesn't. That's how genocide works.
Oh.
It stops when somebody with more guns makes you stop. Uh,
Oh, so it's never going to stop because we're never going to tell them to stop.
no, and seeing as we seem to be the only people with more guns. Um, anyway, to quote from Folklore and Terror in Georgia's Notorious Penkisi Gorge by Paul Manning. It now seems clear in retrospect that the new Georgian Rose Revolution state used exemplary displays of violence against such peripheral terrorist populations only as a kind of pilot experiment. The very same weekend, the new Georgian Rose Revolutionary government used other units of these special forces, the product of the Georgian Train and Equip program, to disperse a protest in front of Parliament, the so-called Wrestlers' Revolution. So yeah, basically immediately after their first, democratically elected president, the first time there's a protest, he deploys U.S. trained special forces to crack down on the protesters.
Hmm. Great.
So that's how that goes. Every time we do it, everywhere in the world. The relatively easy victory in Adjara and against domestic protests made Saakashvili and the Georgian military a bit overconfident when conflicts broke out, in Abkhazia and Ossetia. This ultimately led to a Russian invasion, the near abandonment of Georgia by the United States outside of their commitment to the coalition in Iraq, and a still ongoing Russian occupation of most of Western Georgia. This was, in part, because violent US trained crackdowns perfected in the War on Terror had already been deployed against their countrymen. Because, and this is true, nothing about Ukraine today is surprising to anybody who has been paying attention for the last 20 years, except maybe that the Ukrainians are doing so well.
Yeah, that's the only surprising thing. And I wish them the best of luck with fending off Russia, but
Yeah, they continue to hold. As a
yeah.
direct result of these wars, Georgia's ability to project power into Penkisi slipped once again, and during the early 2010s, the region was a hub of Chechen and other regional terrorists training and traveling to join ISIS during their rise to power in Syria. Over a dozen were identified as coming from Chechnya via Penkisi, and in 2019, local residents clashed with the police sent in to investigate renewed accounts of militant activity in the area. That said, kind of strangely, things have not only calmed down a lot, but basically the only English language information I can find from the last few years on the Penkisi Gorge are from a tourism initiative to rehabilitate the region, advertising things like ancient monasteries and beautiful hiking trails.
I mean, it is gorgeous out there.
So for now, the Islamic State has largely collapsed. Al-Qaeda basically no longer exists. And the Chechens are ruled by a warlord who is dumping them into the maw of a Ukrainian meat grinder. So Penkisi has settled down quite a lot.
Georgia, on the other hand.
Yeah. And yeah, fuck it. Sometimes there aren't lessons in history. But this is all shit that happened.
Yeah. Oh gosh, nothing. This is interesting to learn about. And then I just remembered, like, oh yeah, yeah, the terrorist cells are some mostly gone, but things are still fucked up in Georgia.
Yeah, pretty much. Russian occupation
Yeah,
and what's not Russian occupied is just bullied by Russia because they can.
they
Yeah.
can. Yeah, and the current government is,
They should try being Turkish. That apparently works really well.
yeah, the current, I'm just gonna say this, the current government is essentially very Russia aligned, and they just lost their EU candidate status,
Yeah.
essentially, due to all the political repression and like basically changing election laws to make themselves win.
Woohoo.
So, and they just put in a random soccer player who's faithful to the party to be the new president without any elections. So,
Wow. I didn't think anybody could have a dumber presidential selection process than us, but that might do it.
they just changed it, and like the party now chooses the president because the people voted for an independent who's Salome Zurabashvili, who's actually great, and she follows my podcast, so that's part of the reason why I say that. Um, yeah, basically they cut her ability. They started cutting her ability to do things like 2, 3 years ago, and then just kind of kept getting worse and worse
And then they
since.
installed a footballer. Yeah.
A soccer
Okay.
player who's an idiot, who's a complete idiot.
Cool.
Yeah, he's basically in an interview. He's basically like, oh yeah, the founder of the party basically asked me if I wanted to be president. And I was like, yeah, why not? Who, by the way, is it supposed to not be involved in politics anymore, but he still is.
Yeah. Cool and good.
Yeah, welcome to Georgia. You can listen about this all in a few years on my podcast.
Yeah. For the time being, you can go back and listen to the parts of the podcast that overlap with History of Persia, which are more fun.
Oh yeah, the one episode.
We, I was gonna say most of your podcast is overlapped with mine at this point.
Yeah, it just started in episode 5 and it just kept going.
Ah, well, since we're already kind of in the middle of doing it, do you want to tell people where to hear you, follow you, whatever on the internet?
Yeah, so I am on. Does anybody use Twitter anymore? I guess Twitter, history_Georgia or Czar Power Pod. Blue Sky, Czar Power, Czar spelled with TS. And then on Blue Sky is also History Georgia. Basically, if you follow one, you can find the other. That's the easiest way to do it. I'm on there. I don't post that frequently, but I post. You can follow us on Facebook on the history of Saqartvelo, Georgia, and Czar Power. I also co-host Quest for Power. But I'm just the audience and editor for that show, so you can listen to us on there. This is coming out in July, right? Intelligent Speech would have been out by now, so join up next year so you can hear Trevor talk about another cool topic.
Yeah. All right. If you want to hear more of my very tired voice, you can do that on History of Persia, where I go through the history of ancient Persia. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, or follow me on Blue Sky at History of Persia for both shows, on Instagram at History of Persia Podcast, hypothetically on Facebook, but it mostly just gives you episode updates. And if you want to support any of these projects, please go to hopfulmedia.com.co. That's HOPFUL.com.co. And until next time, secede from a former Soviet republic.